Hello again, everyone, and thanks so much for joining us for Sunday's edition of Alaska Weather. I'm Dave Percy, a meteorologist at the National Weather Service, and I'll be hosting today's show. Up first, we've got, again, hazardous weather graphics. There is none. Nowhere is illuminated in the zones, no watches, advisories, or warnings anywhere in the state for at least tonight through tomorrow, and maybe beyond that. As you can see up to the north, pretty good, and out west, other than the marine warnings, there's no public warnings. And satellite imagery showing a pretty good storm system, say moderate low pressure area, moving south of the Pribilofs and northwest of the eastern Aleutians by mid-afternoon today, the low center, and the front pushing up across the Alaska Peninsula. That brought, it was more of a wind than rain producer, with winds gusting as high as 63 miles an hour at AKwx, and also Atka had 56 miles an hour for wind gusts there. Those are two strongest wind gusts out of that came in from the reports. And Cold Bay, 47 miles an hour, otherwise around 40 to 45 miles an hour, say the eastern Aleutians, and on up Nelson Lagoon to Cape Newenham, and about 25 to 30 moving into Bristol Bay, but some clearing still going on there over Bristol Bay, and clouds on the increase for Kodiak Island. Otherwise, you can see some clearing over the Gulf of Alaska behind a system that's slowly moving into the southeast coast, and the low pressure still off the coast. And that wasn't really much of either a rain or wind producer, with Sitka Ketchikan picking up about 0.15 of an inch today, and that's about it. A lot lighter, just a few hundredths. Some areas didn't get any at all. And that's about the same pattern up over interior Alaska. A couple of troughs, some areas of light rain and showers. But let's see, Ambler and at Adigan Pass both had about a tenth of an inch of precipitation, while Eagle had 0.15. Otherwise, everywhere else was just a few 100ths of an inch. So not really much action-wise as far as rainfall amounts go over the interior. It's kind of just mostly cloudy and cool and a little bit showery, with the wind and rain, the heavier action, although especially wind-wise out with that 983 millibar low parked just north of or northwest of the Fox Islands this afternoon. And for tonight, front dissipates and moves eastward there, but another trough gets its act together, actually the remnants of the low center, and that'll keep the southeast coast, especially along the central and south coast and over the southern areas, with occasional light rain and clouds, more showery up to the north and lighter. Still light rain showers persisting along the North Gulf Coast and in possibly to the Copper River Basin, southern central Cook Inlet, but any amounts will be quite light. Otherwise, much of the interior looks light wind-wise, with some clearing and showers just about gone. Could be a few over the north slope, north side of the Brooks Range, but generally dry. And strong winds continue. You could still see 55 or 50 to 60 mile an hour wind gusts there over the eastern Aleutians, mostly from Woonmac Island out toward Atka. And winds really diminishing over the Alaska Peninsula, with periods of rain and fog continuing with the tighter gradient in advance of the front. Wind will increase along with the rain for Kodiak Island. And the Bering Sea, looking at northerly winds with surges of moisture coming southward, kind of enhancing the light rain and fog in those areas as they drop down, like one will just pass west of the Pribilofs. But clearing and improving out over the western Aleutians, really due to a lack of storminess rather than a presence of high pressure. And for the outlook tomorrow, that low pulls out of the Bering and is well south of Kodiak Island, but the front gets spun far north to the north. It'll be breezy with rain the entire day there, especially on the east side of the island, all the way up into Cook Inlet. Look for cloudy skies with areas of showers and light rain and fog or drizzle. Pretty likely along the North Gulf Coast down into the northern panhandle as that trough slowly edging its way eastward. Not a real strong one, so no heavy wind or rain with it, and mostly in the form of showers down to the south or over toward the border. And just scattered isolated showers up over the interior with mostly cloudy skies everywhere else, and improving lighter winds out over the western and eventually into the central Aleutians late tomorrow afternoon. Up to the north, we've got a cold front dropping southeastward, and that'll bring increasing wind and rain. Not too strong of the winds, but there'll be an increase in the west-southwest winds ahead of that front with increasing chances of precipitation. A little cooler behind it, so snowfall levels will be dropping quite low. And we'll see on Tuesday that front kind of reorients itself with the low center passing by to the north as it moves eastward of the Arctic coast. And that's going to kind of elongate it along the central and west side there. And probably snowfall levels will be low enough for mixed rain and snow all the way down to sea level. Any elevation in the Brooks Range that would fall as snow, that will be mostly on the north north side of the western Brooks Range, with some light rain possibly as far south as Kivalina. Looks kind of showery over the Seward Peninsula. And still northerly winds, that band of north winds shifting eastward a little bit there, and surges of moisture dropping southward will keep periods of rain, Pribilof Islands, Fox Islands, Alaska Peninsula. And this will probably be the strongest winds. Also a pretty tight gradient ahead of that front in the Gulf of Alaska, right into the Kenai Peninsula and across Shelikof Strait, supporting possible gale force winds. Winds gradually coming up off the southeast coast, but that front remaining far enough to the west, it doesn't look like you'll get gale force winds along the coast, and they'll be even lighter over the inside waters with generally increasing chances of precipitation during the afternoon. Out west, high pressure, light winds and sunshine, light winds on the decrease, or winds on the decrease. Winds will be light with partly to mostly sunny skies for the central and western Aleutians, and not too bad over the interior. Quite an area of possible sunshine there. Copper River Basin into the mid and upper Tanana Valley to the upper Yukon Valley to the eastern Brooks Range. And taking a look at low temperatures for tonight, dropping below freezing. Upper 20s there in the Brooks Range and portions of the eastern Arctic coast. Otherwise, just a shade below the frost point there for the central and western Arctic coast, and then mid to upper 30s there over the northwest and western interior. McGrath say a low of 34, call it 47 though at St. Paul, but 37 for Gamble, mid 40s for the Aleutians, and the eastern Aleutians near 50, about the same up the Alaska Peninsula, lower to mid 40s there for the Panhandle, and quite a range anywhere from the upper 30s to maybe near 50 for the Kenai Peninsula North Gulf Coast, but Susitna Valley down into the mid 30s, as well as the Copper River Basin, maybe even some near freezing or a little below in the higher valleys. And for the highs Monday afternoon, lower 50s there for the Copper River Basin, lower to mid 50s south central Alaska. Kodiak Island, mid 50s, mid to upper 50s for the Panhandle, and lower 50s in the east central interior to near 50, Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta, lower 40s St. Lawrence Island, near 50 over the Aleutians and Pribilofs, and mid to upper 30s for the North Slope, central and eastern Arctic coast, and Anatuvik Pass. And that'll be followed by lows on Tuesday morning. Again, mid to upper 20s for the central and eastern Brooks Range area. And let's see, we're looking at lower 30s, eastern Beaufort Sea coast, mid 30s on the central coast, rising to near 40 or so for Point Hope, Cape Lisburne, and Shishmaref, but 36 for St. Lawrence Island. And lower to mid 30s or upper 30s, kind of just in the 30s there over much of interior Alaska, lower 40s for the southern along the coast, 45 to 50 for the Panhandle, mid 40s for the Aleutians. Highs Tuesday afternoon, 55 to 60 in the southeast coast and 50 to 55 over the central interior, 35 to 40 Brooks Range on out.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Moving on to flying weather out west, pretty good batch of IFR. Pribilof Islands on down to Adak, eastward to the Alaska Peninsula near Nelson Lagoon, then along the south side of the peninsula, all the way up across Kodiak Island and to Kamishak Bay and Port Muller and those areas along the south coast of the Kenai Peninsula, and right up along the North Gulf Coast, but staying off the coast of the Panhandle. Areas of VFR over the southern eastern interior. Solid IFR there from the Brooks Range, northern Kobuk, Koyukuk Valleys, up across the eastern Arctic coast. And for the afternoon tomorrow, we've got IFR now on the central and western Arctic coast, about Kivalina, and then a band down into the Bering Strait there, or through the strait. And then eastward to about, I'll say Dead Horse or so, and then marginal VFR for the remainder of the North Slope and much of the Brooks Range, but a good area of VFR there. Upper Yukon Valley southward across the central and upper Tanana Valley into the Copper River Basin. And also some VFR breaking out in the afternoon there for northern Cook Inlet into the Susitna Valley. IFR persisting western Prince William Sound and the northern Bering Sea and along the north coast of the Yukon Delta there, southern Norton Sound to a certain extent. And staying IFR there, Kodiak Island, Alaska Peninsula, the eastern Aleutians, and areas of the western Aleutians. And for the Tuesday morning outlook, we've got VFR again, the east side, Copper River Basin, up across much of the Tanana Valley, with the marginal VFR south of the central Alaska Range, but covering much of the western Alaska Range into the Kuskokwim Valley, and westward, another VFR zone there along the southwest coast to the Pribilofs, to the Alaska Peninsula. More IFR, central western Aleutians, but looks VFR for Shimianatu, with the IFR again holding Shelikof Strait and Kodiak Island, southern Cook Inlet. Now it's including Kachemak Bay and still the southern coast of the Kenai Peninsula, North Gulf Coast. VFR for the Panhandle. And the afternoon, conditions begin to deteriorate there, especially along the coast of the Panhandle. It says VFR over the eastern inside water areas to the border, but IFR showing up along the south coast. Marginal VFR pushing over toward Yakutat with IFR to Cape Yakataga up into Prince William Sound, and still over the southern Kenai Peninsula, Kachemak Bay, and Kodiak Island, all in the IFR zone. VFR, northern Cook Inlet, Susitna Valley, northern Copper River Basin, central and upper Tanana Valley, and the southeastern Brooks Range with IFR, North Slope, Arctic Coast, Northwest Coast, through the Bering Strait to, say, Savunga. Otherwise, much better out in the Bering Sea. Pretty good VFR zones out there over the west central Aleutians and from the Pribilofs to the Alaska Peninsula with marginal VFR for the Fox Islands to Atka. And for Monday, passes, Anatuvik IFR becoming marginal, Atikan, same trend, starting out IFR better in the afternoon. Also, mostly marginal VFR after a possible IFR start for Lake Clark and Merrill. Rainy, IFR becoming marginal. Windy, marginal VFR at times throughout the day, especially south side. Isabel, marginal VFR. Mentasta, VFR. And for Tanita, looking marginal. Portage, marginal VFR. Again, lingering IFR in the eastern approach. And for Chilkoot and White, marginal VFR becoming VFR. Maybe by noontime, maybe a little earlier. And for the freezing levels at the surface, right down to the Brooks Range or just to the south, 2,000 feet just south side of the Brooks Range down into St. Lawrence Island, and 4,000 feet down to the North Gulf Coast, 6,000 feet now down to the Queen Charlottes, and 6,000 feet over the Aleutians. Icing, bands of icing pushing east and northeast, one moving into the southeast coast and another one from Kodiak Island out into the southwestern Gulf. And then other band along the Alaska Peninsula area. Otherwise, the interior, not too bad, really not much of a threat, just a very slight chance in those shaded areas. And then that system, cold front coming down to the western Arctic coast, bringing increasing icing threats there. And for the jet stream, strong jet along the west, or out in the Aleutians there, 160 knots, and then dive southeastward with upper level lows near the Alaska Peninsula and northwest of the Pribilofs. Real light flow, actually, for this elevation across interior Alaska. And for 9,000 feet, 40 to 65 knots across the eastern Aleutians. 3,000 feet, 50 to 65 knots out there. And then 40 to 50 Kodiak Island along the southwest coast. This translates into widespread, considerable moderate turbulence, Kodiak Island, Bristol Bay, eastern central Aleutians.
Welcome back to another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider. As you well know, you can get forecast information for any day of the week. Today, tonight, tomorrow, out to 6 or 7 days. It includes the high and low temperature, the wind direction, the chance of rain or snow in your part of Alaska. But did you know that there is information available to forecast out to 2 weeks? So the question is, how would you use that information? And here to answer that question today and tell us a lot more about climate services from the U.S. National Weather Service Alaska region is Rick Toman. He's the program manager for the Climate Science and Services. And Rick, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Dave.
How would we use information that is out to 2 weeks instead of just the high and low and the chance of rain?
Well, Dave, as we move out in time, of course, forecasts become more uncertain. So as we move into that second week from now, we're not looking at specific highs or lows or precipitation amounts at any given place. What we can do with the state of the science at this point is get a handle on patterns. So we can say things like increased chances for stormy weather in the Bering Sea in 2 weeks, or we've been in a cold weather pattern, looks like 8 to 10 days from now, that pattern's going to change. Those are the kind of forecasts that we can currently make in that second week.
So you're increasing lead time for perhaps big or small weather events and telling us the likelihood of maybe more coastal storms or wind events in some areas?
Those are the kinds of things that that we hope to be able to let Alaskans know in the second week forecast. And if you have an activity or an event that you would find that kind of advance notice useful, whether it's moving stuff off of the beach, whether to go out hunting or to come back from camp, those kind of decisions, the week 2 provides the opportunity for you to get a handle on that kind of information.
Okay. What other type of weather impacts that we're familiar with might Alaskans use climate services for?
Well, in the forecast realm, we can go provide some information from this week 2, say the 8 to 14 day period, on out to the monthly and even seasonal time scale. Now, those monthly seasonal forecasts are still kind of just really very much pattern dependent, and the amount of detail that we can provide at this point is still pretty limited. Generally, indications of how temperature and precipitation will fall in maybe above normal, below normal kind of range. But in the week 2 period, we can be considerably more specific than that as far as the general patterns and really the impacts on Alaskans.
Okay, so we would be talking about generalizations there that would tell us that the period might be more stormy, might be more hot, more dry, more cold, and situations like that.
That's correct. So we're not going to be able to say in which community, for instance, there's the threat of coastal flooding, but we can often be able to tell we're moving into a pattern that would be conducive to big Bering Sea storms. So if you're in an area that could potentially impact you, you'll want to pay attention to the weather forecast.
Okay. Now, every day and every hour of the day, the National Weather Service is working on a forecast for the next day. But how do you start your forecast process for that extended period that goes out beyond 7 days?
Well, the way things work right now, we start off with the expected general flow pattern for Alaska and the whole world, really, and then we narrow that down to Alaska. So we start off with the basic computer model forecast. There's quite a few different computer models that we look at, bring those together. And then another important part of that is we attempt to assess the confidence. The reality is often 2 weeks away, the computer models are very divergent. They have lots of different solutions, and that's an indication that we don't have much confidence. But when we see more agreement in that time frame, and when that agreement is a pattern that will be potentially very impactful for Alaska or is a big change from what we've been in, that's when we can then take that expected pattern. We have computer models forecasting it. We've assessed the confidence. Now we can move that forward. How, using our experience as Alaskan weather forecasters, how does that typically play out for Alaska? So is this a stormy pattern for the Bering Sea? Is this an extra rainy period for Southeast? Is this the kind of pattern that generates strong winds potentially in the Anchorage Bowl? Is this a deep cold pattern for the interior? All of those are the kind of things that we're looking at in these large-scale patterns. That's very different than telling you that the winds on 10 days from now are going to be gusting to 120 on the hillside. We're looking for patterns, not the very specific information that the Weather Service will then hone in on as the event gets closer.
So the idea is to keep the 5, 6, 7 day forecast the same, where you are getting the standard high and low temperature and the chance of wind or rain, but further out you get a broad general forecast, but as the time gets closer to that event, we'll get a lot more specific.
That's correct.
Okay, Very good. So how can people use this information if I am out in the bush and I want to see, is a coastal storm expected in my region, or is a chance for that improving over the next 2 to 3 weeks? Where could I go to get information like that?
When we see that potentially impactful or a big change in the weather is coming 8 to 14 days out, typically we will start to highlight that on the Weather Service Facebook site. We might produce a YouTube video highlighting that, linking that on our Facebook site. So often we don't, at this point, we don't have much to say in that because we're really looking for those forecasts of opportunities. But one thing we can say very likely as we go through the next 2 or 3 years, there'll be more and more of this kind of forecast information available in that week 2 time frame.
Okay, and something that emergency managers and city planners and folks in villages might be interested in keeping an eye out for, looking for that information to be headlined, whether that's on social media or perhaps through the National Weather Service channels there to get information from you to make better plans a little bit longer term and make better preparations in the event that things become a little bit more unsettled.
Absolutely. Climate Services with the National Weather Service Alaska region is talking to the state of Alaska every week, apprising them of that 2-week outlook. And on the social media side, we are working to keep Alaskans informed so that when we think we have some confidence in a high impact or a big change, that's the best way right now for folks to find out about that. Twitter, Facebook, so stay tuned to your National Weather Service.
Very good, a developing program. Rick Thoman with the National Weather Service Alaska region. He's a Climate Science and Services Program Manager. Thanks so much for joining us again, Rick, and I hope to have you back again soon.
Great, thanks, Dave.
For another edition of Alaska Weather Facts, I'm meteorologist Dave Snider. We'll see you next time.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. Today's sea ice analysis, again, not much different except way up there to the north. Looks like the edge is almost, to the edge of the area up there. And really not much change expected for the next several days. And moving on from there to the coastal water forecast for the southeast coast. South coast to the outer coastline, southerlies tomorrow at 20 knots with 7-foot seas. Small craft advisories on the north coast. South to southeast winds 25 to 30 knots with 7 to 8 foot seas. Southeast 20 Clarence Strait and southeast 20 with gale force gusts possible in Stevens Passage, but only 10 knots out of the south for Lynn Canal. And for Tuesday, those light winds in Lynn Canal, Glacier Bay, northern inside waters continue at about 10 knots or so. And no change for Stevens Passage, southeast 20, possible gusts 35 knots, and then a little stronger for Clarence Strait on Tuesday with southeast at 30, winds from the southeast at about 30 knots. And then on the south coast of the Panhandle, we've got 40 knot southeast winds and east 45 knots on the north coast with 18 or 16 to 19, or say 15 to 20 foot seas. And for Prince William Sound, Monday, east winds 20 knots, northeast 20 for northern Cook Inlet. Everywhere else, with the exception of the Barren Islands, has small craft advisories. North Gulf Coast, southeast 25 to 30 knots. Barren Islands east 35 knots, that's good for gales, and northeast at 30 knots for Kamishak Bay. And for the outlook on Tuesday, storm warnings, North Gulf Coast there with that front pushing northward and putting a squeeze on the atmosphere with a tightening gradient. So that's looks pretty good for 50-knot easterly winds, storm warnings, seas 20 to 25 feet, northeast 45, Barren Islands, Kamishak Bay. Big increase in the northerly winds here in the forecast for southern Cook Inlet. As you can see, sustained north 40 knots and small craft advisories north of the Forelands out of the north. Prince William Sound, northeast 30 knots with 7-foot seas. Shelikof Strait tomorrow, northeast 40 knots, and east side of Kodiak Island, at least early on, 35 knots out of the east, probably diminishing in the afternoon, and Sitkinak to Castle Cape, southeast at 30, and north 20 to 25 knots across the Alaska Peninsula. Gale warnings out for Bristol Bay, northeast winds 35 knots, seas 8 feet. They'll swing around to the north, come down under gale force category to 30 knots, and seas about 7 feet. The Alaska Peninsula, northwest, 30-35 knots, strongest on the Pacific side. And then gale warnings from Castle Cape to Sitkinak, northerlies 35, north 40 for Shelikof Strait, northeast 30 east side of Kodiak Island. And gale warnings for the eastern Aleutians. Northwest 35 to 45 knots, seas 17 to 22 feet. Small craft advisories north side of the Adak and Atka zones. Pacific side gale warnings northwest 35 knots. But those winds really drop off as you head west, especially west of Amchitka, where they come down to 10 knots from Kiska to Shimya. And then east 15 knots there for the western Aleutians, Amchitka Island and the area around there, northeast at 15. Small craft advisory, central Aleutians, and small craft advisories to the Fox Islands, with the exception of the south side of Unalaska Island, still carrying gales at 35 knots. Southwest coast, south of Nunivak Island, northeast 35 knots. Gales also in the forecast for the Pribilos, north 35. Small craft advisory, 25 to 30 knot winds. St. Lawrence Island to St. Matthew Island, much lighter in Norton Sound. North 15 for Norton Sound on Tuesday, 20 knots for St. Lawrence Island. Small craft advisories for the southwest coast, still out of the north, but down to 25 to 30 knots. Northwest 25 for the Pribilofs. Arctic coast, eastern Beaufort Sea coast, southwest 20, but much lighter and more westerly as you get over toward Demarcation Point. Small craft advisories for the central Arctic coast tomorrow, again in response to the approaching frontal system there to the west, 25 knots, and then west coming up to 20 knots there for the western Arctic coast down to Cape Thompson to Wales, north at 20. And the outlook for Tuesday there, northwest winds that, or they turn northwest, 15 knots for the central and western coast, right down to Cape Thompson to Wales, northwest 20, 6-foot seas. Southwest 20 knots for the eastern Beaufort Sea coast with 5 to 6 foot seas. And for tonight, wind and rain spread east and northeast, already on the increased Bristol Bay and will do so Kodiak Island. And pretty strong winds still could see gusts 50 to 60 miles an hour for the eastern Aleutians, starting to come down for Atka. And periods of light rain continue for the Panhandle, dry over the interior with light winds. There's that front bringing the wind a little bit of an increase in the wind to the Arctic coast, rain in the Panhandle, and storm warnings there on Tuesday for the North Gulf Coast.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.